Welcome to episode 30 of the Princeton Podcast. In this episode, our host, Mayor Mark Freda, sat down with Princeton Councilman David Cohen. In addition to discussing David's background and his assignments on a variety of council committees, Mark and David touched on the recently revised set of permit parking regulations, as well as many other challenges and rewards David experienced during his past 5 years as a Princeton councilman. So without any further introduction, let's join our host, Mark Freda, and his guest, David Cohen, for episode 30 of the Princeton Podcast.
David, thanks for joining us today.
So happy to be here.
So I think most people know you as a town council member, but how many years have you been on council now?
So I'm just finishing up my 5th year. So next year is my 6th, which means it's also time to run again.
The best part of the job, running for re-election.
So fun.
You know, the council members are on a number of different council committees. They're liaisons to a number of the different boards, committees, and commissions we have. Maybe you could share with our listeners some of the different committees and BCCs that you've worked with over that time.
Sure. So, you know, the thing that comes to front of my mind, because it's what where I actually got my start, I guess I'd say, in municipal governance, is the Pedestrian and Bike Advisory Committee. I first joined that probably a dozen years ago, well before I was on council. And although I haven't been the liaison the whole time I've been on council, because Tim Quinn, one of my former colleagues, was also very committed to that set of issues and took it for one of the years that we overlapped. I've mostly been liaison to that commission. I have done a lot of work around planning, so I've been council representative of the planning board, or this year, as you know, the mayor's representative to the planning board. Some associated things connected to that, such as back, and I think this was the year I started, where we had engaged in a process to try and come up with a redevelopment plan for the seminary property. And I was on that committee, ended up actually chairing the committee after the initial chair, Gail Ullman, stepped down. So that was another thing. Citizens Finance Advisory Committee. I've been treasurer for a couple of different nonprofit organizations over my lifetime. And so that seemed like a good fit. And even though the Citizens Finance Advisory Committee is now no longer meeting, I've continued on the Finance Committee, the Council Finance Committee, as the sort of extension of that set of responsibilities. When I started, you know, as an architect by profession, it seemed like there was a good fit with the Historic Preservation Commission, HPC, so I was liaison there for 4 years, since handed that off to Leighton Newland, who is a new council member who started last year and was very interested in that. I was liaison to the Senior Resource Center for several years, and this all may start to sound like a lot, which it was, and Eve Niedergang generously agreed to take that on. About halfway through my tenure, the Flood and Stormwater Commission was reconstituted. It had been on the books, but had not been meeting for a while. And again, Eve, I have to give credit, she did a lot of heavy lifting to repopulate that committee and get it all ready to go. And then at the last minute, she was told, because she worked part-time for the watershed, that she was conflicted and could not be on the committee. So that got handed off to me, which I am so grateful for, because it really is probably the thing I'm most interested and committed to right now in my council work, is trying to make sure that we're preparing for the effects of climate change, you know. And that's probably the biggest effect of climate change that we feel in Princeton, in the Northeast generally. Other parts of the country have, heat waves or droughts, tornadoes. We're actually kind of fortunate in the Northeast. We just have hurricanes or the remnants of hurricanes. But we have a lot of work to do to be prepared for the kinds of rain events that have become more and more common in recent years.
Yeah, quite a bit. So let me just take a different tact here for a second. Where were you born?
I was born in Rochester, New York, and really grew up there, although my family spent a little time in Washington, D.C. when I was little. My dad did his sort of, in lieu of military service, he was at the National Institute of Health. He's an MD. And he also did a postdoc in London. So I was there when I started school. And I had a British accent for a couple of years when I came back. I can't really recreate that now. But after that time, I grew up all through my school years, my primary and secondary school years in Rochester.
Yeah. So how long have you been in Princeton now?
We came right after grad school, which I finished in 1987. I got my architectural degree and came here for a job. We kind of thought, we'll come for a little while. It's a good job, but, the snooty, waspy Princetonians, we're not going to fit in there. And really discovered a wonderful, diverse community and down-to-earth community where we felt so at home. So we're lifers now.
There you go. Yeah, the stereotype for people from Princeton is very different from what's actually here. Just jumping back to the council stuff again, you were on the Pedestrian Bike Advisory Committee, and then at some point you decided to run for council. So what happened to make that leap? Right.
So I guess the glimmer first entered my eye really about 15 years ago as a member of the American Institute of Architects. For their 150th anniversary celebration, they actually recruited architects all around the country to teach a 1 or 2 day curriculum in middle school about the 10 characteristics of livable communities. And it was really the first time, I had been interested in politics before that, obviously been interested in architecture. It's the first time that I thought about the relationship between architecture and politics or, local politics. And so that got me started thinking about it. And, as I said, I served on the PBAC for a number of years. I actually got invited to join the planning board as well, probably about 8-9 years ago. So also before I decided to run for council. And so it was a gradual process of immersion in thinking about the decision-making that goes on in town to ensure that our livable community thrives and continues. And at some point after that, I just thought, being on council is the most impactful way to bring those interests and skills to bear on keeping Princeton a livable community that I love so much.
There you go. So between the different council committees you're on, the liaisons to the different boards, committees, commissions, and of course all the council work outside of the council meetings and everything, what kind of time commitment do you, how many hours a week do you think you're putting in for all this?
Yeah. It's a lot. I probably right now I'm spending, after having given away a couple of my responsibilities, and as the burdens of COVID have eased, I'm down to about 35 hours a week, I would say. For a while there at the beginning of COVID, it was really heavy. It was like 50 plus hours a week because we were not only trying to do the work of government, but also cope with all the curveballs that COVID was throwing us, special things, special projects that we needed to do. I'll just give an example. We spent a lot of time working on a slow streets initiative, which with, the social distancing that was required by COVID, our 4-foot wide sidewalks weren't enough for people to be out walking and keep distance from each other. And there was an interest in turning our streets. We know that we got a lot of outdoor dining and stuff like that to help our businesses, but there was also an interest in turning our streets into more pedestrian and bike oriented facilities. And so we spent a lot of work researching what other towns were doing, planning for that. We actually ended up getting stymied because DOT got wind of our plans and said, you're not allowed to do that under the 1950s motor vehicle laws of the state of New Jersey. You can't stop cars from driving on streets. So after spending a lot of time, but that's the kind of thing that came under the COVID rubric that added to the workload. So it was like 50 plus hours a week for a year or two there.
Yeah, it's a serious, if you're serious about doing the job right, it's a serious time commitment. Yeah. One recent issue that generated significant public interest was the permit parking discussion. So how are we moving forward on that now? I mean, it's been topic at a couple of recent council meetings.
Yeah. I think council, when the task force brought their initial recommendations, just sort of wanted to feel like it wasn't just the recommendations of sort of a special select group of people, but that, it was really fully vetted and considered by staff. I mean, the reality was that we had included staff members on the task force, but only a few of the staff members who were on the task force were regular participants in the meetings. So, basically at that time, that was the beginning of March, we asked staff to review the recommendations in detail and come back to council with their take on what would be realistic and could actually be implemented. And we asked them to prioritize a couple of issues which we considered low-hanging fruit, the sort of the easiest pieces. And they actually did come back to council about a month and a half, I think, ago with a proposed change to the regulations for Bank Street, which promptly was voted down. Yeah. By my council colleagues. It just goes to how complex this issue is, and how passionate people feel about it. I think it was one of our parking consultants who was with us, 4 years ago or so, who said, people value free parking out of all proportion to what it's actually worth to them. And it has something to do with the fact we all grow up playing Monopoly. And, it's like landing on free parking and getting that kitty in the middle. Just sort of there's something in our lizard brain that makes us feel like free parking is nirvana. So, the work is continuing. We are going to implement a revised set of permit parking regulations that are more fair, that are more pragmatic, that take into account the needs of all of the community, residents, yes, customers of our businesses in areas where that's an issue, employees of our businesses, visitors for our residents, contractors. I mean, there are so many interest groups, I guess I would say, who need access to park on our streets. And I'll just, also, at the risk of going over our time limit, say, one of the things that makes this really tough is that the sustainability agenda in the community is inclined to feel that cars are bad and that anytime we make driving easier by making parking easier makes driving easier, that we're moving in the wrong direction from a sustainability standpoint. But I feel that on-street parking is one of the most sustainable kinds of parking you can have because it's already paved area. You don't have to create new impervious coverage. On-street parking actually has a documented traffic calming effect. When you have cars parked along the street, the traffic that moves along that street goes slower. And that's safer for pedestrians and for bicyclists. And those kinds of active transportation are the best thing we can do for sustainability. So it's much more complicated than people like to realize. But I think that having a solution to our on-street parking, allocating it more fairly is an important part of our sustainability initiatives in town.
Yeah, and we could talk about this for much longer. Right. And even though I got 1,000 thoughts to back up a lot of what you said, we're gonna move to my next question. So people, just getting back to kind of you as a person, we talked about how much time you spend and the other council members spend doing work for the town. I mean, and at very little compensation. I mean, really, when you think about it, I hate to think what the hourly rate is, 15 cents an hour, a quarter an hour. I don't know what it works out to be at the end of the year, but what drives you to work so hard for the rest of the community?
I'm going to take a page from my wife's playbook there and say, just the fact that I feel fortunate, we're very lucky that I can afford to spend this kind of time. We're financially secure. And with that kind of good fortune comes responsibility to give back. And I feel like this is, although I come to it a little bit later in life, it's a real good fit for my skill sets. And I feel like it's a way for me to give back that is really well suited to who I am as a person. And so that's my answer, and I'm sticking to it.
There you go. So let me ask you this. So prior to moving to Princeton, had you been involved in politics at all?
I was a president of the student council when I was in high school.
There you go.
I actually did, I worked as an intern for my congressman while I was in college. I looked at some possible jobs as a sort of a legislative assistant to people at the national level when I was graduating from college. So it has been an interest. But then when I went, once I graduated from college and went into my work life, it took a backseat for a while.
Any interesting jobs along the way through your career that you want to just share with us and say, oh man, I once had this one great whatever?
So I absolutely think it's important for people to understand me, to know that my first job out of school was as an elementary school teacher. I was actually an elementary school science teacher. And, I'd gone to that because I had really enjoyed camp work that I had done when I was a teenager and so forth. I really feel like I'm a sort of a teacher at heart. And so the way that I behave on council is, I try to educate people about what the issues are and how they're interrelated and why I think that my approach to doing things is the right way to go. But I don't browbeat. It's like if I have failed to convince you of the rightness of my position, I've failed as a teacher. It's not your failure as, that you weren't listening or whatever. And so it just colors my approach to interacting with constituents, I think. So I think that's good for people to know. The other interesting job is one that I just started last year, which is as a crossing guard.
Right.
Which I have to say I really love. It was an outgrowth of my work with the Pedestrian Bike Advisory Committee and also work on the Traffic Safety Committee, which is another one of my council responsibilities. Just realizing that there was this drastic need in town. And any of you listening to this who have free time in the morning, you don't have to do both the morning and afternoon. The police they are eager to have people who will work whatever hours they can give. It's lengthy training. It's actually 20 hours of on-the-job training before they'll let you control an intersection yourself. And I will say 20 hours is not too much. It's actually a very challenging job, at least at my intersection. I'm at the corner of Valley and Jefferson, and it's a two-way stop, not a four-way stop. And a lot of drivers don't know how to, don't even know what the rules are going through that intersection. And keeping the pedestrians and bicyclists safe and the drivers to the extent that you can, although a crossing guard is really not supposed to be out there to direct traffic. They're just there to protect the pedestrians and bicyclists. But I love it because it gets me outside for an hour every day, rain or shine, heat or freezing.
No matter what.
I feel like it's good for me physically, and I get smiles from everybody who drives by, waves, and it's just a feel-good thing to do compared to council, where we get where we get castigated on a regular basis.
So you're helping kids, bicyclists. And I guess if anybody really wanted to bother you, now they know where you're going to be on school days, is at that intersection.
That's right, but I can't talk to you while I'm on duty. But if you want to come at 8:30 when I finish, I would love to talk to
you. That's great. David, what do you think some of the high priority issues are coming up, over the next year or so in Princeton?
Well, I mean, one of the big things that's going on right now is the revamp of the master plan. And, for anybody who's not aware, this is a document that was originally written back in I think in 96 was the date on it. Yep. And pieces of it have been updated since then. Some pieces haven't been updated at all. And it's basically a paper document because we lived in a paper world then. I mean, we have it available online, but it's created in a way that it does not take advantage of modern technology, to make it more readable or more accessible, I'll say, because, picture's worth 1,000 words, and just reading is not the right way to get information in this day and age. So really excited about the fact that we're changing and updating the format, taking a look at the older sections of the plan and trying to update them to the realities of today. So that's super important. I think people are aware of that. Also working on the Vision Zero task force, which you, Mark, are also on. And I feel like that's important for people to know about as well. I mean, it's a little bit of a tangent, but basically it's an approach to sharing our roads that prioritizes safety above all. So the last rubric was what they call complete streets, and complete streets is still a priority. What complete streets says is that roadways should be designed to address the needs of all users, not just cars. And it was a revolution or revelation at the time that it first came out, which was probably about 20 years ago. But it was more of a justice perspective than a safety perspective. And what I like so much about Vision Zero is that it sort of takes data, it's data driven. It says, where are we having problems, from a safety perspective? Where are we having injuries? Where we had fatalities? And let's prioritize fixing those locations first. Whereas, the way we had always done things in town previously was, as our potholes get too bad to allow them to continue, we'll redo a road. And when we redo the road, we'll think about pedestrians and bicyclists. But it wasn't prioritized based on safety. It was prioritized based on potholes. And so it's a subtle shift, but it's an important one. And hopefully we'll have a good set of recommendations that'll come out of that.
Yeah. So another one that you're working on quite a bit is looking at the stormwater utility.
Yes.
Maybe you want to just fill people in briefly on that one.
Yeah. So this is just starting off, but I'm very excited about the potential for it. So stormwater utility is a separate sort of governmental entity, just like we have a sewer authority right now, that, bills people for the services they provide and, is run somewhat independent of the government. In the case of stormwater, right now the way we manage stormwater in town and the way all towns in New Jersey do is that we pay for stormwater infrastructure, at least our public stormwater infrastructure, out of the general fund. So property owners pay taxes to help with stormwater in proportion to the value of their property. And what a stormwater utility says is, no, you should be paying not based on the value of your property, but based on how much stormwater you're contributing to the system. To me, that's a fundamental improvement in equity, where it's much more fair to bill people for our stormwater needs based on how much of the problem they're creating. And what that means is that in practice is that old properties that were developed before stormwater management was even something that we thought about, they have a lot more stormwater flowing into the system. They're going to end up paying more. Well, what are they going to do about that? They're going to have an incentive to try and reduce their stormwater outflow. So this is a fantastic way to incentivize improvements to the stormwater system that don't only need to happen when a property is being completely redeveloped, right? It gives people an incentive who aren't coming into the planning board to do a new project. It gives them an incentive to improve stuff. And the other big benefit is that the fee for stormwater is a fee and not a tax. And so tax-exempt organizations are not exempt from the stormwater fee. And in a town like Princeton, where we have so many large nonprofits, so many institutions that are off the tax rolls, it's great to have an opportunity to get them to chip in at least to this aspect of the public expenditure, to help out with that. So that's exciting to be able to redistribute costs a little bit in that way.
So let me ask you one last question. What do you enjoy most about being a council member?
I really enjoy getting in the weeds. I think probably I've revealed that slightly during this conversation. I really like learning in depth about a problem, whether it be permit parking or stormwater management, and doing the analysis and coming to defensible policy decisions based on that sort of deeper understanding of the issues. I really love that. And I do really enjoy interacting with constituents about the topics that I'm excited about. So, I don't know. People don't call me nearly as much as they call Mia for some reason. She may seem more accessible. I don't know how many calls you get, Mark, but again, if anyone's listening, I would love to talk to you. If you have interest in these topics that I've been talking about, I really enjoy that aspect of it.
Yeah. Well, and that's good to hear, right? Because that's, if I'm a voter and if I wasn't in my position, That's what I want to hear my elected officials say is, yeah, I'm willing to talk to you. I'm willing to listen to you.
Please reach out. My email, my cell phone, is right up on the website. So easy to get a hold of.
There you go. Well, David, thank you very much for having joined us today.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm really happy to have been here.
Terrific.
Thank you for joining us for the 30th episode of the Princeton Podcast, produced by the podcast production team at HG Media, providing audio and video production services here in Princeton since 1999. If you enjoyed this episode of the Princeton Podcast, please share it with your friends. Visit our website at princetonpodcast.com and be sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts.